No, we stood up against the war in Vietnam, not because we were against our country, but because we were for our country, being the best that it could be. We were not anti-American. We were anti the leadership that helped to destroy the image of America. Yes, I love marching. I marched in Vietnam. Yes. Father Paul Moore, Bishop Moore, and others who went to Vietnam. And we went there as a part of the Fellowship of Reconciliation so we could support the third force, they called it, the students who were protesting against the war, the Buddhist monks who were setting themselves afire. We went to investigate the repression against those people in their own, who were oppressed in their own country, trying to bring about peace and stop the war. Yes, I went to Vietnam, not in a uniform, but I went with some who had been in uniform, who carried their dog tags back and left them at the U.S. Embassy there in Saigon. Yes, I was with them, and we marched to the U.S. Embassy there in Saigon, and we were met with a flurry of tear gas. They tear gassed us with our own canisters made in the USA. And so I jokingly turned to one of my friends and say, "Don't complain, this is your tax return." The last march I went on outside of this country was in Colombia, where we marched to Caicedo, a town that had embraced nonviolence. And when the FARC came to take their truckloads of coffee beans, this group had been organized and trained in nonviolence. They surrounded, 7,000 people surrounded their trucks, and the FARC stood away from them. They didn't know what to do because they had never seen that before. Children, women, all of them. 7,000, Caicedo, up in the mountains, the Andes. So the Governor Gaviria, he decided that the next time when they went to take their coffee beans, the FARC took them and took about 4 or 5 trucks out of the 12. There were priests there who were praying with the rosary. They took the rosary and threw it in the river. They took the butt of their gun and hit the priest in the head. And when I heard about this, even though I'm a Baptist preacher from my toes to my head, I said, tell the FARC they had better find 10,000 rivers, because I'm going back to the United States and get 10,000 rosaries and bring them back to Caicedo. And that's what we did. We took 10,000 rosaries. You should have imagined going through security with, they couldn't figure out what we were doing with these roses. So we got interrogated, you know, a long time. We went to the outskirts of Caicedo, and then we went and met with the FARC. They said they wanted to meet with us, but instead they kidnapped us. Yes, you're looking at one who had been kidnapped by the FARC. And my friend, the governor, and the peace commissioner, they kept them. They let me go. They called me gringo. And they let me go. But the thing they asked me, they say, you with Luther King? I said, yes. They said, you a freedom fighter? I said, yes. They said, well, why do we have you here? They were saying it in Spanish. I understand more Spanish than I speak, you know. I grew up in Ybor City in Tampa, Florida. Grandfather was born in Havana, okay? I speak more Spanish when I was a kid than I do now. But I said to them, okay, yes, I'm a freedom fighter. And this is a freedom fighters movement. So they finally let me go. but they killed the governor and the commissioner a year later, Gaviria, who was the governor of Antioquia there in Colombia. So I've had that experience marching there. I've been arrested 27 times here in the U.S., fighting for freedom, following Martin Luther King. He was my inspiration. So I close with this. First of all, we're going to have another march here in September of next year. It's going to be the Children's March. It will be the end of the decade for nonviolence, the 21st century. But when that decade ends, we're going to start another decade, and then another decade. In fact, we're going to have a century of nonviolence. We're going to train young people from all over the world. So we want you to bring your college students and your high school students now with you next year in September at the UN. Peace Day. Yeah, 21st of September. Check with Dennis. He's our organizer. And they're going to make a pledge, and they're going to say that not only do we want this decade, but we're going to work for the rest of this century so we can make sure that we have a global, nonviolent community. We want people represented from every country there. And we're going to speak to the UN like we spoke to the UN today, and we're speaking to the world today, saying this is what we want for our children and our future, our world. Why am I involved? We're training Nigerians right now. Next week I'll be going to South Africa because we'll be training Nigerians, carrying them to South Africa so they can see on their own continent another African country that gained their freedom through a nonviolent struggle led by people like Tutu and Mandela and others.